You're listening to Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you.
Do you want to talk about types of labor?
Different kinds of stealing or different kinds of work?
Different ways that aren't labor theft or wage theft that can still make a company money by undervaluing its employees. Because this episode is wage theft, but we really want to cover other ways companies skip on paying money to its people. Because there are plenty of legal ways. You do not have to ask people, hey, get off the clock and then come back and do an hour of work. You can completely and totally get free labor from people.
I want to tell you guys something, too, about this show. Joe and I, we do a lot of research and we practice and we put a lot of time into this. And after we do an episode, Joe, and I'll speak for Joe on this since he spoke for me on the last one, we get these brilliant stories and ideas 2 days after we record the podcast. So I got one, and I'm just going to throw it in here real quick.
Sure.
I was going to get into the insurance adjuster job. And I'm not going to say the companies, but they're two big companies that probably every single one of us has our car insurance through, one or the other. And they were doing for the underwriters for when you're in a car accident, they come look at the damage. And they were heavily advertising their bonuses. We have this amazing bonus. It's about half of your pay. This percentage of employees get it, which was a high percentage, and it sounded really good. It was like half of your pay. And then I read the reviews from the employees and the former employees, Joe. And what it said was the only way to hit your bonus was to clock out of the computer and do work on your days off to hit it. So you'd have to work 7 days a week to hit that bonus that they were advertising for the job.
Wow.
If that is an example of what we're talking about, I don't know what is.
It's absolutely perfect. It's the same thing as having you race with everybody else to do the last hour of work, and then 3 people get to stand on the podium and get cheered at. It's the same thing. It's getting a bunch of people to do extra labor, and then one person wins the lottery at the end, and everybody else just gets cheaped out. This lottery system, the idea that one person gets the bonuses and eventually gets a real job and eventually gets the big boy job we're talking about, who eventually gets paid, that's kind of the pyramid of work right now. And we're going to talk about how that looks legally. Like, how do you get people to work for you for free? Well, one way is what Todd's talking about. Offer a big bonus or offer something like an incentive, but only a couple people get it. If everyone works really hard, you pick the best one. Another way to do that is internships. Now, internships can be a good thing. There's a kind of like a quirky fact show called Adam Ruins Everything. They have an episode about interns. It's fun. Go watch it. We're actually going to get our information from the same sources before, the EPI.org. They talk about how between 1 and 2 million people overall will work as interns this year in the United States, and that saves firms about $600 million across the board.
Almost $500 million. Oh.
Yes, almost $500 million.
And they're bright, fresh, smart college kids.
Yeah, you're getting people who have gotten the newest, best, most updated information. And just anecdotally, I remember reading about doctors, and apparently young doctors have sometimes better records for not getting sued because they have the newest information, because they are updated. That older family crotchety doctors will oftentimes be the ones that get slapped with lawsuits, not because they're bad at their job or that they're older. It's because they stop at some point keeping up with, like, they're not reading the newest medical advances. They're not reading about new practices.
Continued education. Right,
continued education. So the way that a intern is legal, like the way you make it legal, a intern have to be, quote, the primary beneficiary of the labor. And this is according to the Department of Labor. So this is big. If an employee is the primary beneficiary of labor, meaning if the person doing the hiring is the beneficiary, that means according to Fair Labor Standards and Acts, they're entitled to minimum wage. So that intern, by primary beneficiary, what I mean by that, they have to be getting more out of the deal than the employer.
How's that work? Because they don't pay them.
That's exactly right. So they have to be
Loose to
providing
interpretation, right?
Yeah. No, there's a way to prove it. You have to prove that the person hiring you as an intern provided more education, more benefits, more connections. They have to be giving you more than what the pay would give you.
I
as
get
minimum
that,
wage.
but it's pretty tough to prove.
Prove when this has happened. But Todd and I are very cynical. We just think
Such a
everyone
better
wants our
man
labor.
from this free job.
Yeah.
I've learned so much. Doesn't this sound kind of arrogant on these companies that think that
Very,
they're teaching
very
that
much
much?
so. You working for us for free is more of a benefit to you than if we had paid you. It does sound like a jerk thing to say.
Yeah, and we're not saying they're all bad because people do get ahead and they do get hired on with that company. But how many 30-somethings out there would go fill out an application, make a YouTube video pretty much begging to work for this company, then coming in doing multiple interviews so you can go work there for free?
Right, exactly. How many of those people filling that out even know that they are supposed to get the bigger benefit between them and the company? This should be something that like gets thrown at every intern who's about to apply. It should be on the application that the primary beneficiary is supposed to be them, not the company. Let's talk a little bit about contractors because this really hit big in the news lately too. Well, first I want to tell you a little bit about. I have our duplex has a downstairs, and one of the guys that lives with us, he's a roommate and he lives downstairs. He works at Intel, and for years he wore a blue badge. I believe is the way they do it. It's blue versus green, and you want to talk about like classism.
Say whoever the contractors are the lepers, right?
Exactly. Here in America, if you're listening from overseas, we have a contractor problem. If you're an outside contractor, you are not technically an employee, and you don't get benefits. You can just straight up kiss those benefits goodbye. You're there for the pay and nothing else. Once companies learned they could do that they could like shrink their employee force and inflate their contractor force, hire from outside companies, they started using that as a trick to skip on paying. Like if they don't have to pay 401ks or benefits or anything like that, they will totally get away with that. He used to wear a blue badge, and he said that when he went into work, his badge wouldn't open certain doors. Literally wouldn't open doors to certain lunchrooms, workout rooms, rooms reserved for full employees. He worked there every day. It's not like they called him in like a contractor to like, he wasn't supposed to come in on only Thursdays to work on the lights or something.
Right, he wasn't just painting one of the walls and had to be gone. He was worked there every day.
Yeah, he built computers for them. He eventually became a full employee. So like he was side by side with employees that wore a different color badge, and he couldn't go eat with them.
Must have felt nice the first time he was able to use the bathroom inside.
Oh my God. Yeah, he used to talk about the blue badges, and he would talk about them like they were different people, like that they could go anywhere they wanted, and they made X amount more than he did.
Well, I know another big company here that's probably similar in size, and I know the regular employees, and they almost are embarrassed by how much the contractors do, by how little they make.
Yes.
So a lot of these regular employees, what their day is just delegating to these contractors for a fraction of what they do it in-house.
Right, exactly. According to the LA Times, that is a perfect point because I actually wanted to find out how much less contractors made. So according to the LA Times, hiring workers or employees rather than contractors can add 20 to 30% to the labor costs given Social Security, Medicare taxes, unemployment, disability, sick leave, minimum wage, overtime, rest breaks. So everything really just built together. You save 20 to 30% if you hire a contractor instead of an employee.
And I don't have any stats to back this up, but what I do think and what I've done in my corporate life was when they're a contractor, they're holding that carrot that we'll hire you on regular if you do a really good job.
Exactly.
So they make them do a lot more work in that promise with no guarantee.
I watched my roommate go through that process, and it was painful because he was like, maybe they'll make me a real boy someday. It was hard. It was tough to watch. There is a case that just broke the news. So in the UK, they were trying to fight for contractors for Uber. I don't know if you know this, but Uber and Lyft and a lot of the rideshare programs, they're contractors. They don't get breaks, they don't get minimum wage, they're not entitled to anything at all. They just drive, and all of their costs hit them. So medical coverage, problems with their cars, all that just comes to them.
But what? Yeah, I read about this because it was getting to the point where they're making less than minimum wage. So they're saying, okay, come on,
Right, exactly.
making $7 an hour, miling out my car.
Yeah, that without God, can you imagine like driving and finding out you had like back problems or something? But yeah, no protections whatsoever, no minimum wage, no holiday, no rest breaks. And okay, that strikes me. No holiday pay. During holidays, Lyft and Uber have like, what is it, golden time or something. They charge higher during holidays, but the the contractors don't get any holiday pay. So the UK just ruled that Uber should treat people like employees, that they are entitled to holiday pay, rest breaks, and minimum wage. If this carries over to America, then that means it's basically another taxi service. And wouldn't you hate to be a New York taxi driver holding a $1 million to $700,000 medallion when Uber becomes a taxi service?
Just saturate the market, and you can't get a ride to save your life.
Right, I would be pulling out my hair. But yeah, this is how companies get around having to pay people in the first place. They use contractors, they use interns, they skip paying as much as they can before they even turn around and try to do wage theft. Lastly, I kind of want to cover salary transparency. Have you ever had one of those awkward conversations where you look over at a coworker and you ask, how much do you make?
Well, being in the sales business, we either brag about it or salespeople don't have that problem. We love telling people how much money we make. What about you?
I had a soul-crushing moment once. I was working contract work, and I had a new guy come in, and we were just talking. Like, he knew nothing. He was screwing up his job left and right. We were all trying to pitch in and lend him a hand. And then, like, three of us are standing there. We're all old hands. Like, we've all, we've been through our trial. We're full employees. We're full contractors.
You've come in and covered shifts when you didn't have to.
Right.
You've stayed late, came in early.
Yeah, we've literally
trained
all
other people for free.
Walked through a snowstorm to get to work. This new guy who was screwing up literally everything, we found out he made $2 an hour more than the rest of us.
You must have been horrified.
He was brand new to the company. He had just been hired. Yeah, salary transparency. There are videos on this. There is a Planet Money episode called When Salaries Aren't Secret. There's an Adam Ruins Everything on this. Basically, when bosses negotiate salaries and employees keep their hourly rates themselves, because it's embarrassing to talk about that. Like, it is tough.
Well, my sweet wife, she's on the board of directors for a hospice, and they just went through this. With coronavirus going on, they're having a hard time hiring people. So they said, well, let's do this bonus of $10,000. Well, then one person on the board of directors says, what about the people who've been here?
Right, exactly.
Is that fair to them, the people who have stuck with us through all this?
That's the question that I think every employer or eventually goes through is, we need new people. We need them in right now. But how do we treat the people who have been here and been loyal?
Because we certainly don't want to pay those bastards more. But the market says no one's calling or applying because we're not paying enough.
Right, exactly. So that, unfortunately, most bosses will actually go with the, yes, let's hire the new people for more money, but let's not tell anybody. So when everybody is transparent at work, when everyone shares how much they make, employers lose because people get mad and they come back to their employer, their boss, and they say, hey, the new guy who can't do anything, he's making $5,000 more than me because he negotiated better than I did, and I'm not going to stick around if that continues.
That's not fair.
So those are kind of the ways that companies can hire for less or basically get free labor or cheap labor. we've already talked about illegal wage theft, like what Walmart got caught with. How do they make it legal? How did Amazon get away with it?
Micromanagement and scanners.
Okay.
Scanners technology is the best way to do that. And that's just to watch everyone's breath step, what they're doing at every time. To say, oh, look, you're not working right now.
Okay. So everyone's worst nightmare at the job, where like you have an eye on you 24/7. These people literally do.
They do. They're timing and checking every single thing you do, every heartbeat. Think about unpaid 25 minutes to get through a security check
Okay.
every day. Do that math over. You're like, I'm sure there's to get out too, so you can't drag any stuff out with you.
Yeah, it's 6,500 minutes a year. That's 108 hours, so it's 1,620. So there we go.
I'm talking about what we talked about earlier, the swag contest that Amazon has.
Okay.
So that's a way to crack the whip. And it's supposed to be fun and motivating. Probably the same people always win, the people who are the fastest.
Right.
I'm not fast at anything, so I know I wouldn't win. I'm like a 5th or 6th placer on a good day.
Okay.
What about you?
No. We used to, again, I worked at a loading dock for FedEx, and they would have these micro contests at the end for loading and stacking trailers. I was never number one.
Well, tell me about that, because I've had my buddies that work for UPS, and it's when they're college kids or after college. They only can work 4-hour shifts, and they've told me that they just go balls out. Like, you couldn't work 8-10 hours. You couldn't physically do it. 4 hours, you're ready to drop.
That's exactly when I worked it, and that's exactly how it was worked. It was after college, and they did work us for 8 hours, but they had lunch breaks in between, and they had mandatory short breaks. But you did not leave your trailer for that short break, and it was insane. By the way, nobody listening to this podcast can tell this, and of course I've gotten out of shape since then. In college, I was really into martial arts and weightlifting, and I was in really good shape, and they had me doing a trailer, and then my manager came over one day, and he's like, you're doing fast, and you're doing pretty good. Let's put you on 2. And then after that, I was put on 3. And I was just jumping trailer to trailer trying to keep up. I thought I was bad at my job. And then my friend who had got me that job came over. He's like, what are you doing? He was like,
Oh, so you're one of the swag winners then. Your stats were good.
I didn't win a damn thing because they were basing it by trailer, not by person.
Oh, no, so they're dividing up your pie.
Exactly.
Oh,
My friend was like, no, you don't go faster when they ask you to. You work the same trailer and then you do the next one half as well, so they don't do that to you.
my goodness. See, that's one of those tricks, one of those hacks that the seniors got to teach us.
Exactly. Yeah. At every level, if you are a manager, if you are working a team, it's your job to find out the most efficient way to get your people to work harder for nothing more money-wise.
So you as a 35-year-old man now, who's still in good shape, could you go back and work that job today?
Oh, hell no. Both my knees would be broken.
It's not sustainable.
Not at all. No. There's a reason I left.
Well, another way, a wage theft legally is what we talked about in the intro, was the 15-minute breaks at Amazon, which is mandated by OSHA.
Mm-hmm.
And it's needed, when you're working on a line. But if the break room's too far away, you're getting your break, but you're not allowed to really take a break and relax. Kind of like what you said about eating lunch at your desk.
Right. It's like The Sims. Like, you tell someone to walk out and catch the car to go to their job. They only have enough time to walk there and walk back. They technically don't make it.
It just seems to me that the lower paying the job, I always think of the people at McDonald's who are stressed out of their mind, who are just flying, and people are ungrateful, and people are ordering off the dollar menu and asking for extra pickles and special ordering like it's a fucking 5-star restaurant.
Right.
And never do they rip their people's head off like I think they should.
Right.
I'm in line behind them. I'm more pissed off than the people that work there.
You said at the beginning of the episode, I mean, like, you talked a bit about how much money these people make. I feel like the less money you make, the more you need breaks and micro stress management, the more you need things to be easier on you, and the harder employees, like, not just mentally and emotionally, but it seems like These people are put under undue stress as far as breaks go.
On the topic of McDonald's, I was in one day, I'll never forget this, and a young woman who came in, and she was sharp. She dressed up for the interview, and she brought her resume to work at McDonald's. And I was impressed by that. I was just eating and just kind of listening and eavesdropping. And then I watched this manager just grill her about why she wants to work here. I mean, like it would be for a $100,000 a year job.
There's a scene in the was it the Unbreakables? No, Untouchables, where they're like, "Why do you want to be a cop?" And he's like, to serve the public trust or something like that. It's like you would grill somebody like that if they were a cop or a firefighter.
Yeah. So, and then she was trying to answer the questions and being professional, doing the best she could. And then she's like, "Well, how much cashier experience do you have? Do you have at least 3 years?" Again, like unreasonable. Like,
right.
This is just a kid. It's her first job. Teacher.
Right.
There's some other ones too that are kind of more casual. They're like more gray area. Everyone's had this. Your boss doesn't want to talk to you until after work. Can you stick around?
Right.
Can you come in a little early? We're going to have a company meeting.
Yeah, company meetings, training time, like coming in to talk about scheduling or coming in to do extra training.
That one just touched a nerve on me.
Yeah.
Being in my sales career, I worked as an estimator for a construction company. That's what I'm doing now. And then being auto finance, where I used to do the paperwork when you come and buy a car. There's always stolen time. They need you to come in on your days off to clean up some deals or to have a meeting or go do a product training. Or we need to get you on because you have to get certified and all that. They don't pay you for any of that because they're taking you off the floor of where you make your commissions.
Right. My current job, they don't pay for any extra training or certifications. We have to hold like cards to do like state stuff. Like we have to be CPR certified and things like that. They don't pay for any of that.
Well, Joe, when I was working in auto finance when I first met you, and I was an outside sales rep, and I'm working for these big, very, very wealthy auto finance companies, which is about close to loan sharking as you get. When I'd go on company trips, I would have to pay to go, and they would pay me back sometime. And I'm like, why do I have to fucking loan money to these billionaires?
Right. You are loaning money to your own company. And technically, you're doing the same if you end up being compensated for gas and things like that, right?
Now, I'm going to leave you with this on this part. This was also from the Surviving Amazon article. Amazon has built a vast logistics empire by subjecting its workforce to extreme forms of technological discipline, designed to keep workers isolated, fearful, and manically productive.
Okay.
I love how that's put out. So you're afraid you're going to lose your job. You're isolated. We all know this from our Dieter Lumbar, if you remember.
Right.
Which drove people, if you don't know that episode, you can tell them about that.
Yeah, if you isolate people and you keep them fearful of their job, they can commit suicide. They can suffer massive mental breaks. Like that, it gets productivity and it gets the job done, but by God, it comes at a cost.
But driving people to manic productivity.
Yeah.
How can that be a quality of life?
Right. Is it worth $15 an hour? I mean,
it's not worth it for $100,000, but it's worth it even less when you're not making any money. And then you go home and you have all the stresses of, again, not being able to buy new clothes for your kids, not being able to drive a car, not being able to have food.
Right. Yeah. At the end of each one of these little segments, we just have to remind people this is half of America, and $15 an hour and medical benefits, that's the magic number to lock people in because they need those things. They literally die without the medical benefits the way our health system is run. Did you happen to stumble across Amazon's video game system they had briefly?
No, I didn't hear about that.
They tried to use their scanners and their work trackers to turn people's productivity, them scanning boxes, into a video game to compete against each other like it was a multiplayer game.
Oh, that's one more of those kind of...
Talk about manically productive and fearful. Yeah, it's another one of those weird game them into productivity.
I can just see the scoreboard, and if you're that lower 10, 15%, your names are all in red.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
You just feel like shit.
Right. So not only you're isolated while you're walking the floor, looking at your wristwatch or your tablet or whatever they have you carry, then you get to see your name on a board at some point with your score by it. How soul crushing.
Then you get two pregnant ladies in your team. One's in the bathroom, one's trying to lift a 500-pound thing, and then your manager's score's coming down. And they're like, "Oh shit, we're all fucked," you know?
Right.
You guys start working heavier.
Right. Yeah. The team stress. If you are that person, if you are Rosales and you're like, I'm pregnant, what am I going to do about this score thing? They did apparently stop doing that video game. Like apparently that was a short, oh yeah, we are into a Black Mirror episode. So that didn't last too long.
It's not because they didn't. It wasn't for moral reasons, though.
No,
right? It wasn't. That's not why. That's how I feel bad about this. I know that's not why. It just didn't work.
These big companies, they don't do anything for moral reasons. They just realize that it was. Yeah, once something gets negative publicity, that seems to be the only thing that makes them stop. Really. So I keep talking about this $15 an hour sinkhole in the economy, and that is now maybe going to become the federal minimum wage. Do you want to talk about what jobs actually make?
Please enlighten me.
Because Todd and I hope everyone listening isn't just like listening to us complain about the crap jobs we've had over the years and just shaking their heads and being like, none of those are grown-up jobs, you scrubs.
It does feel good to get off our chest, though. Thank you for listening. If you're still listening.
Right.
We do whine a lot, Joe.
This is the episode for it. I went looking for respectable jobs. Like I went on to a couple of the websites like Glassdoor and things like that. And I just wanted to play the hypothetical game. You ever do that when you're sitting around and bored? You're like, what if I had gotten my degree in something else?
What if I would have stuck with this?
Right.
Or my friend did this, and look how successful they are now.
Right. I'm not going to say how much I made last year, but I do not work a good job. I write on the side, and that is becoming a bit more lucrative these days. But my day job that I work for health coverage, it is one of these crap contractor jobs that we're talking about. And I wanted to go through and play this game that everyone plays, which is what if I'd got my degree in something else? And boy, oh boy, when I started seeing that there's a regression, that high-paying jobs that used to be very respectable, very well paid, are starting to sink back down to that $15 an hour mark, and seeing lower-end jobs starting to raise up. Taco Bell for our state just raised their pay to be approximately $15 to $17 an hour, depending on what position you're in. And it's going up for some of the other, like line cook and things like that. So low-end jobs for our state are starting to go up to that $15 an hour hole. High-end respectable jobs are actually starting to fall back toward it. To start with, I want to look up teachers because in my mind, the most respectable job on earth is teacher. They shape the future. They mold children's minds. They will determine basically how secure a country is. I mean, you want to talk about like China keeps beating us in like their students' math scores, and then 10 years later their economy is dominating us. We're like, what happened? It's like, well, this happened.
Right?
Yeah.
We don't connect the dots on that.
Right. We're like, oh yeah, well, if you teach your children how to do math, they will be doing math when they're older. I, on the other hand, am confused when letters end up mixed in with my numbers. So a beginning teacher's salary here in Oregon is around $36K a year, 36 to 51K. That is not a teacher's salary in my mind.
And I know restaurant workers work 50 hours a week that make more than that.
Right. I beat that lower number, which is sad because I am not a teacher. I am working a crap job that I abuse to write. I literally, hopefully my boss isn't listening to this, I write during my shifts.
These are very educated, very hardworking.
Bachelor's degree holding people.
And there were a lot of applicants. They weren't begged to work either. That's why the pay is like it is too.
They competed for the job they have. If you have a master's degree and you are a teacher, so we're looking at like high school, college teachers. That's 40K to 63K a year is what they're hiring for. That's still lower than the happiness index. We've had a couple episodes now where we have talked about the happiness index. The happiness index, what is it? It starts at like 70
Looks like
or 80.
85K was the good one.
Yeah, and then 90 is the amount for it surpasses the happiness index, and then it goes up to what is called the fulfillment point, and then after that it plateaus off. So neither of these numbers have even touched the happiness index yet.
And the happiness index is you stop thinking about money all the time. You're not obsessing about it.
Right. You're
thinking
no
about
longer
quality of life.
Yes, your quality of life is no longer dependent on money. Is effectively what that index is about. Firefighters. We've joked in episodes before that I hold them up as a standard for like this is what a good job looks like. They make between 25K and 70K a year. So we're getting into that index. The plateau for the happiness index is 80K for most sources. Most colleges, their studies have shown that. So if you are at the upper end being hired as a firefighter, so you're experienced, you have years of experience, we're not talking overtime. We're just talking this is your base pay. You're not at the plateau of the happiness index yet.
And you're running into burning buildings, saving people's lives.
Yes.
Working as an EMT. I mean, we're talking, yeah.
You're a
first
hero.
responder. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you are a paid hero. You're not making the happiness plateau in that index yet.
Bonus to that is Joe Anthony here, when he sees a firefighter truck roll by, he does fist pump in them.
I do, yeah. I do like Rube Wydell, that old baseball player. I chase after them, fist pumping the whole time. You ever see those guys that do high-rise window cleaning downtown Portland?
Yes, I had a buddy in Seattle that did that. His whole life. His whole family did that.
His whole family. So this is a grim question. Please help me if I'm wrong on this. Do they all end their did any of them make it to retirement? Like they didn't fall off the buildings, did they?
No.
Okay.
No, they move up. I just remember that my buddy, because he told me that he bid a job for the to wash the windows at the Seattle Library, which is this huge glass building, and it was like $80,000, and I about fell off my chair. Yeah.
That's wild.
He said, "Have you seen the fucking place?"
Yeah. Well, they can get contract work, and they can be paid different amounts for different companies and different buildings. But if you're just looking at the starting pay, like I am going to jump in as a high-rise window cleaner, for an experienced window cleaner, it's about 37K to 37.5 a year.
And let me just add this: so compared to firefighters and teachers, they're right there with them with zero education.
Exactly.
Because firefighters need degrees too.
And again, not a stress-free job. You're jumping off a building with a rope on you, or you're on one of those catwalk things that go up and down the building. So it's basically comes out to be $18 an hour, and you are throwing yourselves off the side of a building. So 37.5, and then of course an Amazon warehouse worker. That comes out to be about 31K a year. So if you are an Amazon warehouse worker, when we talk about the $15 sinkhole in the economy, it's 31K a year for an Amazon worker, which is 5K less than the lower end of a teacher with a bachelor's degree. So if you could work a lot of overtime and you are working a shitty $15 an hour job, this is how you beat a teacher's salary with no education and working something dangerous that will probably get you injured, like a steel mill or a sawmill.
It's just the repetitiveness could drive you mad.
Right. So I have a quick question for you, Todd. Your mother was a teacher, right?
30 years.
How often would she bring work home, like grading papers, working on syllabus, things like that?
All the time. So she started as a teacher in Maine in the old days for $14,000 a year, and that wasn't even a lot of money back then. But her job now with texting, student meetings, she stays up. She works 7 days a week.
Right.
She probably works twice as much as she used to for the exact same money.
I started trying to do sort of the armchair math on this, and I realized pretty quickly it's probably already been done before by colleges. I may be wasting my time. But I really do believe that if you end up on salary for a lot of these higher paying jobs, even if they're like respectable, like you end up with a master's degree as a teacher, we're not even going to get into how much your student debt is going to cost you throughout your lifetime. But I really do believe that jobs that employ you for higher than, say you get close to the happiness plateau, the happiness index, I absolutely believe the reason why salaried work exists is to drag you back down to the $15 an hour mark. I think this is not a your mother joke, don't hurt me, but I think your mother might actually be working for $15 an hour after you consider the time it takes to grade papers and bring all that work home.
And classroom size is getting bigger. Absolutely.
Right. It is also worth mentioning that while searching for respectable jobs, to give us an idea of how respectable jobs have been dragged back down to $15 an hour, anything whatsoever involved in the medical field has shot up. Like it is, it's crazy. If you wear a white coat, you will make the most amount of money, basically.
I have a couple of friends up in Seattle, and they're pharmacists at Walgreens, and I'm real close with them. And they've explained this to me. They do have great salaries. They do work very hard. They're very stressed. They work in retail.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them at some point have had guns held on them to get OxyContin.
Oh, wow.
Which is heavily, and there's addictions, and there's people coming in begging for pills who have addiction issues. So there's stress on it. But what they told me was these pharmacy schools, all these colleges are pumping out 10,000 of these people, kids with pharmacy degrees a year, every 6 months, whatever, right? There's not that many pharmacies. So these guys, kids getting out of school thinking they're going to make 80, 90 starting out, are having to work 1 day a week.
Oh, wow.
But what it's also done is wages haven't gone up for these pharmacists. It has in other healthcare fields, but they don't have to raise wages, even though they're in a very profitable pill business, because they've got all these students coming out that will work for what? For less.
I really hadn't thought about that, but colleges, there was a boom when I was back in school. Everybody was in computer tech, and it's because student counselors and career planners, when they'd see you walk in as a student, they'd say, here's what's making money right now. And then you would have 10 years later, 5 years later, a boom of people with that exact degree. And so whoever was running the company, like if you're a computer tech company back when I was graduating, you got to hire people for dirt cheap. Now I guess it's pharmacies. I guess, career planners are like, yeah, get a pharmacy degree.
Well, and everyone's going to say, well, you make great money. You should be happy. You should manage your money well. But let's face it. If you go out and get a master's, a PhD, or even a bachelor's, you should have a fair wage. And when you do that business for 10, 12, 15 years, master, become an expert, you should make a lot more.
Right.
That's just plain the way life should be.
Right, but if the company can keep you on for a smaller incentive, like if they can just, here's a 5% raise each year, then you making a moderate amount above a student coming out of college, then, they're going to get away with it. We're heading into territory that I feel like it's going to come off as complaining, so I want to get back to sort of like the stats and the articles that will save us from sounding like we're just moaning. So there's an article I'd like to share with you. It's Why Can't Americans Get a Raise? Have you this came out from Slate. Have you heard of this?
No, I've never heard of it.
It was a very popular article. I remember it landed in my emails, and I just ignored it a long time ago. This came out in 2017. But holy hell, this should be mandatory in America. Like literally, if you are going into get a job or if you're starting a small business, this should just be something they hand you. It should be in textbooks. Some of this is opinion based on economists sort of speculating. So I will start off by saying that this isn't all 100% fact or all completely and totally There's a little bit of opinion sprinkled in with this economy, so take that for what it's worth. We always want to share our sources here on the episode to let everybody know, where we're coming from. But this is such a fantastic article. They really ration out to me or rationalize to me why companies like what we're talking about do not give wages or pay raises throughout your career. So I'll start with a question. Todd, how many times in your life have you been offered a raise?
We talked about this on the Alpha episode. Working really hard and being aggressive in your field, networking, you probably only get promoted about 3 times in life.
Yeah.
And I've gotten raises probably 3 or 4 times.
I got a raise once.
Wait. I got raises by switching jobs. They've never come to me and said, we'll pay you more for what you're doing right now. Never once.
Okay, no, that's different. We want to... Actually, that is a great point to hit on. I have only once ever gotten a raise, like a straight out, they came to me and they said, we're going to pay you more. And it was, incentive for staying at the job. I have always gotten raises when I've gone to a new job. Like every single time I've gotten hired at a new company, I make sure to do it for a little bit more than the last one. And that's kind of how Americans roll nowadays. But the incentive to keep employees on just simply is not there. Companies are much less likely. They're more likely to hire new people on for more money than what you make than they are to offer you a raise to keep you there. And this article explains why. This is a Slate business article, Why Can't Americans Get a Raise? And they talk about how job growth and job openings have exploded in the past couple of years. This is something that I've seen in the news. This is something that comes up on both Fox and CNN, so both sides of the political spectrum. And they also sort of base some of their data from this on the Atlanta Federal Reserve. So this is verifiable. There's currently 82 straight months of job growth. So we're in a healthy market for jobs. Like it should be at this point, employers are really supposed to shell out more because they need positions to be filled.
We're selling stuff. We're building stuff.
Right. There's an unemployment rate of 4.4%. And a record of 146 million Americans with payroll jobs. If you take all that into account, that means that currently job openings in America, there are 5.7 million openings.
Wow.
Given these conditions, wages should be going up. Like people should be offering more than the $15 an hour sinkhole that exists. Like everyone is currently offering $15 an hour for everything. But if you look at the chart from the Atlanta Reserve, they haven't been. Just employers simply will not bring their rates up. And it's been about 10 years of that.
Let me scream, Purse, can I?
Yeah, please.
It's very common for people who have what we would refer to as big girl and big boy jobs. They will look at an opening that's on Indeed, ZipRecruiter, wherever, on a job board, or on the company's website. And they will say, we will only hire someone with industry-specific experience. And you have to have 5 years of it. You have to have these degrees. You have to have this experience. And then their starting pay will be about a 20, 30, 40% less than anyone would make it at their own job.
Right.
And they don't see that. They don't have any kind of gauge. To get people who have experience in this industry, we're going to have to pay them, like what you said, as a reasonable person, more than they're making now, or they're not going to fucking come. This seems like real common sense to me.
Yeah. To put that in another way, basically what they have to do, what they're trying to do on a recruiting website, they're trying to poach you from another job, but they're offering starting amounts. And that is, so the New York Times covered this. I want to talk about this a little bit. In this article, they talk about a New York Times feature that came out where a Columbus, Ohio cleaning company was just completely mystified that they couldn't get somebody in at $9.25 an hour. Shocked, yeah. And it's exactly what you're talking about. They wanted somebody who was experienced, who could do the job, and they're shocked that somebody wouldn't come in at basically what is now minimum wage for most major cities. And Columbus, Ohio, I don't know what the minimum wage is there. Apparently not the same as it is here. But the employer who they interviewed said, quote, "I sometimes wish there was actually a higher unemployment rate so they could get who they needed."
Horrible, yeah. I wish everything was worse off, right?
Yeah, they're wishing for 2008 to be back so that they could get somebody in at the low rate they're asking for. Same article, a Nebraskan roofer couldn't figure out why somebody wasn't coming in for 17 an hour, and she said the pay is fair. We're going to look at this as a large economy problem. So this is also from Slate. All this is from this article. We're just Todd and I are mulling about this very infuriating article. If 1 million of those 5.7 million job openings were filled at the median pay, that would mean an extra $47 billion moving through the economy. It would be going from the corporations who are offering the money to the wallets of Americans. And that's not an inconsiderable amount. There could be a skill gap where the workers just don't have the training necessary, like you were talking about, where they want somebody with multiple years there. They want somebody who has a degree there, things like that. And this is kind of an assumption that I've heard older generations make, which is there's a skill gap, that people who are coming out of school, they just don't have the skills or they're not being trained correctly. But I really like this. The New York Times writer Benjamin Applebaum put out an opinion. They said a lot of American businesses have lost the muscle memory of how to compete for workers.
Absolutely. They've lost the flexibility in their approach.
Yes, I think that is completely true. And that's the argument that Slate makes in this article. They go on to say, like the Slate article, the whole point, the whole case they are making is that we had 18 months of recession between 2008 and 2009. And it was a destructive crisis that just crushed companies. And corporate America went into what they called a survival mode. And the way they survived, do you remember how most companies treated the financial crisis back in 2008?
They laid off a lot of people, and then a lot of people, they were asked to make pay cuts.
Exactly.
Substantial.
Yeah, I remember seeing the news back then, and they were holding up like CEOs on pedestals because they would take a 30% pay cut to save their company.
Or the $1 a year salary. Remember that? The
Oh my
CEOs
God.
would.
Oh.
They were agreeing,
Okay.
if we get a handout, government handout, we'll make,
I remember, was it Zuckerberg that was like, I am only accepting a $1 salary? That same year, he ended up making a shitload of money on his stocks for Facebook. So anybody that says they're going to be the CEO and they're only making $1 for their salary, that's complete crap. There is a Stuff You Should Know episode about this where they talk about how all of those people, CEOs, if they need to recoup their own salaries, they do it in stocks, and they do it by messing with the value of their stocks. So,
and then the other level, they're going to get all their money back in bonuses 10 times over. But the people who are making 60, they say, hey, if you want to stick around, they know in the stagnant job market, they're not going to find another job. So they're going to say, we'll pay you 46.
exactly.
And then if you're making, $22 an hour, well, we can keep you on, but it's going to be $16.50 an hour.
Right. So to our point, Todd's completely right. 2008 to 2010, private sector companies slashed 8.8 million jobs, and they slashed at the same time wages and benefits. When I made the joke earlier about what's a pension, that's what went away in 2008 to 2010. During those crises months, pensions went away. It became 401ks. It became limited benefits. People started making moves to hire contractors instead of full workers. Basically, this whole podcast episode comes full circle when we realize that's where everything went away, is those peak recession years. Companies became practiced in slashing and saving.
And they only want to pay you while you work there. They don't want to pay you until the day you die.
Right,
It's not
exactly.
like a marriage. And I'm guessing, Joe, I have to refer to you on this. For all the industrialized countries, we're probably the worst one of these.
I once looked up the rates that CEOs make compared to the average employee, so the pay difference. If you take into account their stocks, so if Zuckerberg only gets a $1 salary, it's how much does he also get compared to the employee versus his stock? We are beating the rest of the world in the difference between a CEO and his employee. Japan had a movement about 6 or 7 years ago to level the pay rate to where a CEO was capped at making like 10 times the amount as their lowest employee or something like that. We'll never do that here. We make above 120 times the average employee for their CEO. So like if you there's
The rich get richer.
right.
The poor can stay right where you are.
That's precisely it. So yeah, we as a country, unless you consider companies that are actually doing everything illegally, like we're the country that beats everybody for legally making a CEO the pharaoh at the top of the pyramid.
We've invented a new industry.
Yeah, we've gamed it into existence, and the people at the bottom of that pyramid, they're working for $15 an hour. So this is the Slate goes on to say this. So for a long period of time, companies became accustomed to getting all the labor they needed at the low prices they wanted, and they managed to hold on to staff despite not raising wages. So after we climbed back out of 2009, as we sort of got back on our feet as a country, employees didn't have to raise their wages. All employees, like I don't know if you felt the same way, but back in 2010, I was just happy to have a job.
I was too, because I lost a really good job and it hurt. And I was applying and there just weren't openings. Everything was in a hiring freeze that was at that income level. So I had to just, work for a lot less and be grateful for that.
Right. I had, when I went on vacation a couple months ago, went to Texas, I had a moment where somebody emailed me and they're like, from my company, they were poaching me. They said, hey, we notice you haven't been to work in a week. How would you feel about switching over to another company and making, an hour and $85 more every, an hour? And I didn't do it. Like I came back and went back to my normal job, and I remembered having a moment, like I sat down and I was like, why didn't I take the new job? And I was thinking, well, it's because I know where I'm at. I'm at a place that's not going to fire me anytime soon. The new place would have been a risk.
Fear of a mean boss or no less security or more responsibilities. There's all kinds of fears.
Right. It was complete risk aversion. And then after reading the Slate article, I realized it was because you and I survived the 2010 crises. Like we got used to the idea that somebody is currently paying me and I'll just hold on to my job no matter what. So this, as Slate puts it, this becomes a feedback loop. Companies are geared to not raise wages at all. Like we go back to the top where like farmers are losing their crops that are rotting because they won't hire a picker or a machine worker for $2 more because they know they can get an employee for less if they just post that job for months and months and months on ZipRecruiter.
So they're losing way, way more money than $2 an hour, but they're stubborn to the end.
Exactly. Even like in industrial companies or companies here in the city, they will not hire a technician for $2 more. They will not hire a contract worker as a full employee because they know that if they just keep that job open long enough, they will get somebody for that lower rate. And people who are already in lower wage jobs, they're afraid to leave. Like me. Like they're in that 2010 crises mode where they're like, yeah, I've got a job right now. So speaking of people that kind of keep their jobs forever and they get secure in it, I noticed that in our subjects pitch doc, you had something in there, a note about immigrant work ethic. And it's been sort of sitting there for a long time. This felt like the better episode to include it in. So could you explain that a little bit?
Well, it's something that's warm to my heart. My ex-wife is Korean. My current wife is Filipino. So I have a soft spot for any immigrant that comes to the country.
Okay.
And my experience has been they're just really, really hard workers. And not to say that Americans aren't, people born here. But there's really something to say about someone who comes from a lot tougher situation and comes here to make it.
Right.
Now, I had a painting company a construction painting company up in Seattle. And we started out with all Korean employees because that's who we knew. That was family. And then we added Hispanic. And the whole time we tried to hire Americans. And they would come and they would leave. And they would always have driver's license problems or personal problems. And we just didn't have any luck with them. So it wasn't like we gave up on it, but it started to be kind of a waste of time. But on the immigrant work ethic, we had a whole family they're from Mongolia that came work with us. They were Mongols, and they were amazing workers. And the thing I remember about them most was they worked with a smile on their face.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you know how nice that is.
Yeah, I don't do that. I grimace at people.
But we had this one guy. I was riding. His name was Oogie. Oogie was his name. And we were riding around, and we were going from one jump site to another. And I said, "Why are you always smiling all the time?" And he says, "Oh, this is fun. I get to work with Koreans, and I get to work with my people from my country." And he says, "Todd, you got to realize where I came from. I wouldn't have enough money to buy that juice you're holding in your hand. I could work all day, and we could never afford that, no matter how hard you worked. And here I get to have an apartment and a car and feed my family, and it just really warmed my heart." And I had experience early in my life. I used to work on a farm as a kid on the weekends. And the place I worked on I worked directly with the owner, but there was a heavy amount of undocumented immigrants that worked there. And I just remember the owner of the farm, who I work with every day, seemed to have a real negative attitude towards them. And I watched them work so hard in the field. They lived in these like things that you'd have to upgrade to call shacks.
Okay.
So they lived on the property, and they worked seasonal. And he had ways of not paying them too. He'd pay them no benefits. He'd pay them like commission. So they work long hours for little pay, and it was very seasonal, and they couldn't count on it if weather went wrong. And I always thought that was funny, just the way he acted. He didn't have a grateful heart. Like, these guys are working their ass off. And maybe I'm judging, but it was pretty obvious. To me, it was just flat out racist.
There is a lot of data to back up what you're saying. And one of the things that came up over and over in these the cases against large companies, not necessarily Amazon and Walmart, but it came up over and over again that the vast majority of people who are on the disrespected and disenfranchised end of wage theft were immigrants. It's a lot of them. Basically, if you get hired illegally, you can fully expect to have wage theft happen to you. It's just going to. It's because they know you will be reluctant to go report them, and they know that building a legal case against you as an employer is damn near impossible. So they will keep you hours after you should be clocked off. They will train you off hours. They will give you seasonal work and contract work. They will put you in the not just like unfair, but the worst of the types of timed work.
It's when I saw this too, there was I read this a couple of years ago, and this was when they were having a lot of other immigration issues here, and it was in the Southeast, and the farmers were screaming bloody murder because they were paying more than we're even talking about, but they weren't allowed to have immigrants come in anymore, and they said nobody else will do the work. They'll come and work for a day, kind of like the experience I had in the painting.
Right.
The pay can be great, but if you just say it's not worth it,
right,
it's not worth it to me. You need someone to do it.
We're not gonna get the data out because I want to save this for a completely different episode. We have an episode coming up that heavily involves immigrant started businesses and the stats behind those. But I'll just leave a little brief spoiler here. According to several college studies, they're more successful. They last longer on the market, and we've in several of these articles we've covered, they actually do talk about the immigrant, the quote unquote migrant workers that we have gotten so much of in the news. They're leaving. Like we don't have as many migrant workers in America today as we did before because so many of them don't want to do the jobs for as low wages it's offering.
Because what they're getting paid and what they're getting treated is not fair. It's not worth it anymore.
Exactly. Our mental image of a field full of, Mexican migrant workers picking, fruit, that may still be true for some places and some farms and some areas, but literally, like when I talked about that New York Times article where they're like, food is rotting on the vine, it literally is in some places.
I can't wait to that episode. I'm glad you're doing a full episode on that. Now, you've been chomping at the bit to tell this story about New York taxi drivers.
Yes.
You won't tell me what it is. It's not written up, so enlighten me.
So this is an article that we touched on the idea that Uber is now going to be paying a minimum wage, and that they're going to provide benefits in the UK at least, like a taxi service. The irony of that, and I know I teased this earlier, and I talked about how I wouldn't have all the data for it, but there are many articles about this. You can just go online, and there's like, 10 New York articles. Like almost all of them are based locally, so you got to look up New York articles for this. Do you know what a medallion is for taxi drivers?
No, you said I'm thinking gold chain. You know what I mean?
It's if you imagine like a hairy chest and a gold medallion.
Exactly. Like that stereotypical.
I want you to imagine more like a license plate or like a numbered metal plate.
Okay, I'm thinking like they only have a certain amount of them, kind of like the fishermen up in Alaska. They only give contracts to a certain amount of people are allowed to fish. Period.
Precisely. That is exactly it. A taxi medallion or a New York medallion is a little license plate looking thing that comes from the state, and they only release like a couple thousand of them because they don't want the streets completely and totally clogged by taxis. They
It's
don't
like
want to be
lottery. So
mega
if you have
congestion.
you have ABC Cab Company.
Right, exactly. These medallions about 10 years ago were worth $1 million a piece. And they would be in crazy debt. Like it's not like they made that much money driving taxis. They would just pay it, and they'd be in that amount of debt until they eventually paid it off throughout their taxi career. Taxi drivers today, they don't make that much. It's 35 to 40K, I believe, unless they have like a primo route or they know exactly where to go. Like they do make money, but it's not as much as you might think.
Yeah, it's harder than ever with the Ubers and the Lyfts and the.
That is exactly what tanked
its
them.
ass.
Yeah, they made twice the amount of money. From what I could see in most of these articles, they waver a bit on the exact amount, but they made about twice the amount of money when they held medallions and when they were the only game in town. Uber, because it is a hailing system, it's not quote unquote a taxi company. It is a ride share.
Oh, so they don't need a medallion.
They don't need a medallion.
Even Uber, who could afford 100 of them, doesn't. They don't need them. Right.
They don't need a medallion because they are not a technical taxi company. And now, if the ruling in the UK somehow makes it over here, if we have American judges also say, hey, you need to pay minimum wage and benefits, Uber becomes a taxi service without medallions. And these medallion-holding taxi drivers, almost all of whom are immigrants, are now saddled with $700,000 in debt apiece because these medallions are basically now worthless, and they make half as much in a Uber-flooded market.
So they're working every day, all day long for free, pretty much, in hopes that someday, things will change.
Right, and the taxi companies themselves refuse to relieve these people of any kind of their debt. They won't help. Like there's no purpose. Like they would, as far as they're concerned, it's on the individual employee to settle their own debt out.
If you think you never encountered wage theft, I want you to think back on every boss that's asked you to stay late, to have a quick chat off the clock about your schedule, or kept you late without compensation. Maybe you're the person who takes lunch at your desk, or you deal with the office trash bin on your way out the door. Even if you're not being robbed at a big-time warehouse or store, you still might be vastly underpaid for what the company is making off of your labor, especially if you're a contractor instead of a full employee with the benefit that comes with, or if you're not getting paid at all if you're an intern. According to Purdue University, 60K to 75K is what it takes to be happy in America, and 95K a year to achieve life satisfaction. But in the state of Oregon, where we're podcasting from, teachers, firefighters, and window washers either barely meet the lowest side of the happiness index, or they fall far short. In fact, in the modern age, it feels like $15 an hour has become a gravity well in the economy, dragging jobs that used to be respectable, like teachers, down toward that number, while back-breaking warehouse jobs are sucked up towards $15 an hour at the cost of incredible burnout rates and injuries. For companies like Amazon and Walmart, there is no one product that makes all companies money. They don't produce a rare metal like Atlas Shrugged. Instead, automation or overseas labor provides a vast array of cheap replaceable commodities, and the real goods are the employees' time. Or as Amazon puts it, its almighty rate is the real product. And that high rate, keeping cheap goods in constant motion to cut down on cost, requires human hands. Hands at Amazon and Walmart have proven that they'll steal back from, given the chance. Half of America has become the labor force building Bezos' pyramid, or the pyramid of some other CEO. Except, instead of hauling stone blocks for the beer rations, we're moving boxes around an Amazon warehouse, or we're serving tacos, or answering phones in a call center for $15 an hour plus benefits. Because we, the employees, are grateful just to have a job. And employers are mentally stuck in the labor-rich recession of 2009. This is a trend that will take a lot of rotten crops in the field and books going unbalanced before employers finally get competitive with compensation. Until then, 42% of the U.S. will labor in Amazon's empire. But unlike Amazon and Walmart, at least the builders of Egyptian pyramids weren't asked to give back a sip of beer each day. You've been listening to The Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to this 2-part episode on wage theft. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
You can connect with us at www.reengineeredyou.com, where we have research links, show notes, and blog articles for each of our episode. We also appreciate feedback. We love spirited debate, and please check out the links and sources for this episode. There was a lot that went into this.
I think we got 2 years of whining out of our system, so.
I think so too. This was cathartic.
We apologize for whining, but we kept doing it. We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.